Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across this country, there are many people today who are worried and they're concerned and they're even fearful about a number of things, but two of those things consistently work their way to the top. The first one is the enormous amount of debt that this country is incurring and this administration is imposing upon our children and our grandchildren, but transparency of where our dollars are going. If you look at the millions of dollars that have gone to Acorn, no one in this administration can tell you where they went and account for them. We've got millions of dollars going to banks that no one can account for. Billions of dollars in the stimulus package that no one can account for. Billions of dollars in welfare benefits that no one can trace and account for. And we have czars popping up all over the place with no accountability. So we look at these people across the country who are fearful and concerned, and sometimes we say, why are they assembling themselves together, and why are they using some of the language that they are using, but what are their options? And let's look at just one agency, the Department of Defense. Many of us have been concerned that these huge expenditures are for the first time putting us in a position where our budget is driving our defense posture as opposed to our defense posture driving our budget. This year, when the defense budget came to the Armed Services Committee, the Secretary of Defense was required by this Congress, by law, to submit two things with that budget. First of all, a plan about the number of ships that we have, a shipbuilding plan, so that we could look at that plan and see how it matches up to threats that we have around the world. And the second thing was an aviation plan. It just makes sense that you have a plan and know how many planes you're building and where they're going to be so we can see whether we can defend this country. As the ranking member on the Readiness Subcommittee, it is important, I felt, for us to know those risk factors. The law says specifically in 10 U.S. Code Section 231 that the Secretary has to submit a shipbuilding plan and then certify that this budget will meet it. The law also says he has to submit an aviation plan and certify that this budget will meet it. This year, he simply refused to do it. And, Mr. Speaker, when we then said, well, what are our options, we thought, first of all, let's just be polite. And so we wrote a letter. I wrote it as ranking member of the Readiness Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee, asking him to submit those plans. You know what we got? This is what we got. Absolutely nothing. And so then we decided, let's work in a bipartisan manner to see if we can correct that. So the Armed Services Committee issued a congressional inquiry demanding that the Secretary of Defense comply with the law and simply give us the plan and give for shipbuilding and aviation and certify that this budget would meet it. And, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly what we got: nothing. Every member of the Armed Services Committee unanimously agreed that that information should be submitted by September 15th and issued that in the congressional inquiry. And to date, the Secretary of Defense has refused to turn over those dollars, those figures, that certification, and those plans. And, Mr. Speaker, I just ask you this: how can the Secretary of Defense look our men and women in uniform and say, we expect you to follow the law, to follow the statutes that Congress has passed and the President has signed, but they apply to you and not me? So I don't know what options we have, but I know this, Mr. Speaker, that I'm going to continue to come on this floor day after day after day until the Secretary complies with the law and gives the Armed Services Committee what he's supposed to give us: a shipbuilding plan and an aviation plan and the certifications that our budget will meet those so that we're defending the United States of America. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.